and welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mark Kosoglow. Mark graduated from Penn State University in 1998 and then became the general manager of Nittany Notes, where he was responsible for everything from hiring, training, development, inventory management, and of course, sales. After discovering his knack for sales, Mark went on to hold 2 more long-term sales positions before finally landing himself the gig of a lifetime as the VP of Sales for Outreach in 2014. Mark is among the rare breed of VP sales who held his position for over 8 years, including a promotion to SVP of Sales prior to leaving Outreach, at which point he became the CRO of Catalyst Software in 2022, where he remained until February of this year, when he started working on his most recent project, Operator, where he now serves as co-founder and CEO. Mark believes that as an industry, we got greedy and wrecked the outbound model. The playbook was simple and worked, so we automated it and ignored how resistant buyers were becoming. After having lived through the brightest and darkest times of outbound sales in B2B SaaS, I can say wholeheartedly, I agree, and I'm darn curious to learn how Operator plans to address this problem. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment if you have questions. If you're joining us from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please drop us a review and let us know what you think of the episode. This stuff really helps to grow the audience. Without further ado, let's dive in and find out more specifically what Mark thinks is broken with outbound and how he plans to fix it. Mark, thanks for joining me and welcome to the show.
What up? That was the most professional podcast intro I've ever had in my entire life.
I feel like that one came out the best. I take a little bit of pride in these. It's like actually the most fun part, aside from actually running the interview for me, is writing those intros. I don't know why, but I have a little bit of fun with it. And I always to date have messed up reading it, except for that one. I made a small mistake, but I didn't stop myself. So I'm a little bit proud there. So that came out good. I rehearsed it probably about 25 times last night after I wrote it. And what I do is I try to rehearse it really fast after I do it really slow. And then I see if I can read it really, really, really fast 3 times, then I'm good to go. And I think it worked. That was my new strategy last night. And I didn't mess up.
Nailed it, brother.
So that's it. Well, thanks for joining me, man. It's been, years of just following you along on LinkedIn. You know, as I said before we jumped into this, like I feel like I know you already.
Yeah, for sure.
But clearly I don't. So I'm excited to dive in. As I was putting together questions last night, I'm like, do I want to go back and just talk all about outreach? Because we could do that for hours. And I figure I'm going to focus on the future, but you'll probably be able to pull in, learnings. I imagine a lot of what you learned at Outreach carries into everything that's going on today. So I figure it'll probably work its way into the convo, but I stuck with really high level questions here as I've done through most of the podcast, because I want to see what direction you go in with it. Right.
Let's go.
And so some of these questions are similar and repeats of prior episodes, but it's because I'm trying to get everyone's take on these same topics. And so when I saw you start talking about Operator, I was like, uh-oh, he's trying to get right into the weeds of these problems that I've been talking about. So I'm excited to learn and see what's going on. So we've got 6 or 7 questions, sorry. And let's start right at the beginning. You just put up the Operator website. You guys are pre-launch right now, right? I think you're giving some early access or some beta testing. We'll jump into that. But you've got a manifesto up there and it gets straight to the point. I love the way it's written. So let's start at the top. I've been talking about this for a long time. I think it was 4 years ago now that I first started saying the SDR model is broken. I did a nice friendly debate / conversation with Aaron Ross. We've got that live on YouTube 4 years ago. And that was really the first time that I started having these conversations. And since then, it's obviously just continued to move in that direction. And then I think what happened is the pandemic just massively accelerated a lot of change. So I want to, I'm not going to waste time going into my thoughts there. I think everyone who's listening to this already knows where I stand and probably we're aligned on most of it. But let's start there, lay the foundation. What do you think is broken with B2B outbound today? And how did we get here?
Yeah, listen, I think the reason it's broken is because we have sacrificed, or we've used, I like to say a lot of times, like a lazy man's better is more. And what happened is we've just, instead of looking thoughtfully at what we're doing, we've knee-jerked our way because of crazy board expectations or expectations of ourselves or growth numbers or whatever. And we just like crank the dial up to 11. And the world has rejected that. Society has rejected that. I mean, we have GDPR, CCPA, do not call us. All these things exist because we were abusive in what we did as salespeople to the markets that we were trying to help out. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it. But like that's really what it comes down to, Collin, is like people didn't actually try to get better. They just try to do more. And sales automation tools like outreach give people an ability to do that. You know, the tool is never the problem. It's the person using the tool. And people started figuring out ways to use a tool. And like, listen, you and I both know right now, like we have friends, we know people, oh, I'm rotating like 37 domains and I have like 10 email addresses in each domain, but I only send out 5 emails a day. But you add all that together and I guess what? I get to send out like 3,000 emails a day and nobody knows. I'm so smart and tricky. When all they're doing is it's just, they're looking at themselves. And it's, dude, this is crazy to me. This is crazy to me. I just read a post yesterday and the guy said, listen, this is how I'm getting all these meetings in Outbound. One, I found like really great data that is unique to me and the people that I'm looking after, and I figured out a way to get it. Love it. Awesome. I use that data to score leads and I use signals to prioritize which ones. Oh, dude, awesome. And then number 3, any lead that isn't good enough for me or a human to reach out to, I throw into automation. And I was just like, wait. You just said you got data, you scored the lead, and the lead was found to not be interesting enough to have a human on your team reach out. Yet, you think it's worth to send an email for another human to have to read and process and deal with all your crap, even though don't think that person's valuable enough to send a human after. That is crazy thinking, and that's the kind of thinking that we've had. And we've just gotten to the place where like, listen, because I can do it, and it's cool, I'm going to automate the shit out of it. And that's how we get the toxic automation.
You nailed it. So we're 100% aligned. I suspected we would be, but yeah, that's the case. I like to say we're a victim of our own success in many regards, right? When you sort of, have taken us back to sort of where I, started this with Aaron Ross when I first had that convo, even though I said I wasn't going to work this in. Now I kind of want to, but we're aligned. But it was basically the same thing, right? It was like, we have this process, whether it's predictable revenue or then you add the tools in the outreach, the sales loft, the Apollos, right, to really pour fuel on that fire, and it just gets abused, right? It gets essentially too easy. And then I think it was Kevin Dorsey who brought up on one of the episodes with me where he said, salespeople have actually just gotten worse because of these tools. And I think he's right. I look at that from 2 different ways. I think if you go back, 20, 50 years, the average salesperson today probably has better skills and ethics than maybe they did back then in certain ways, but they're also probably lazier in certain ways. They're also probably doing things they shouldn't do. And you just hit the nail on the head. There's like a psychology piece to it there where people have almost like this addiction to spray and pray. And I think that was a perfect example there because it's like the person even knew that these weren't great, but it was just like, well, I'm not going to waste them. I may as well just spam them, right? And it's like, well, you have to realize the damage that does too.
It's not
right?
worth my time to reach out, but your time is, I'm okay taking it from you to do messaging that wasn't important enough for me to even think about creating, right? It is kind of nuts, and I think that ultimately, the tools made it easier. And then we have really smart people that over automated stuff. And, listen, like I have Alexa all throughout my house and she's going to talk now. But basically, I've had it so advanced where like I pull up in my driveway, the garage door opens, the kitchen lights come on, my song switches to the Sonos. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, the automation didn't work. Then I'd spend like an hour on Saturday trying to fix it. And by the time I add up all the time I have trying to do this automation, it'd have been just easier for me to hit the open the garage door button and flip on the light switch, right? But it's cool and I can, so I did, even though it wasn't a point to it. And that's how we've gotten with GTM automation. It's cool and we can, but that doesn't mean we should do it.
I'm totally aligned. This ties us perfectly right into the next topic, which is growth at all cost. This is something I've been chatting it up a lot about. Spoke with Jocko Vanderkoy, who's got a brilliant take on this. He's dove, a million layers deeper. If anyone's curious, listen to the episode there. I forget what number it is, but he's sort of got this take, and I'm pretty aligned on it, which is that we're sort of graduating through that period. But I tend to think that there's sort of like this fork in the road that's happening. And I'm not sure that I agree that it's like everyone's going away from growth at all costs. I kind of think there's this divergence that's taking place. I don't know if that will be how it remains long term. But what I feel like I'm seeing today is a lot of companies going away from growth at all costs. Maybe they're going remote, they're hiring fewer salespeople, they're trying to scale demand ahead of headcount, which is something, a lot of us have been pushing. But then there's other companies like Rippling, I use as an example, where they're just still going full steam ahead, growth at all costs. And I actually think it's the right thing for them to do. They're trying to get market share, they have the money, they have the great product. So I think there's still a place in the world for the growth at all costs. But I'm curious to get your take. I mean, just to set the stage, like I think Outreach was probably a growth at all cost company. And I don't say that in a bad way, just to be transparent. I mean, there's downsides to that stuff, but there's also a lot of reason to do it, especially when your product's really crushing it, your marketing's crushing it, and you just want that market share. And Outreach is probably a perfect example of that. I mean, SalesLoft was around, everyone knew who they were, and Outreach just sort of blew into that space. At least that was my perception. I don't even know the dates they started, probably about the same. I don't know. It usually is. But that's what it felt like, right? It felt like Outreach came out of nowhere, beautiful brand, just sort of one-upped them on a bunch of things. And then it makes sense to me to do that growth at all cost model. And the reason I ask this because it ties right into, I think, what caused a lot of this automation and excessive scaling of this stuff. But what's your take on that? Where do you see growth at all costs going? Do you just see it disappearing and, new solutions like Operator are going to pave a new trail to that? Or are you kind of in the camp with me that like there's sort of going to be these two different models now?
Well, listen, I think in the end, for most non-lifestyle cash-based businesses that have investors, we all have to remember what the number one responsibility of a company that has investors is, which is delivering value to your investors, right? Like if you're a public company, if you're a private company, that's your job. Now, there's things underneath that like, hey, we got to build a great product. We have to keep our customers happy and things like that. But those are all in the service of the investors and doing what's right for investors. Investors are fickle people. 3 years ago, guess what they wanted? Growth at all costs. They would give you money. They would throw money down your throat if you would grow at all costs. They've changed their minds. Now what they want is they want efficient growth that creates margins and profit and all that kind of stuff. And it's a season. And you know what? In a few more years, a couple more months, who knows when, they're going to change their mind again, and growth at all costs will be the new thing because there'll be 2 or 3 companies that grow at all costs. They'll take off. Everybody's going to want to copy them. And then the investors will want to copy or want to invest in companies that are copying them because they want the same growth mechanics and the same return as what those companies got. And like, this is just where we live. If you're not bootstrapped and you don't own your own company, you're always going to be subservient to what the investor dictates is valuable to them. And then if enough investors think that way, the market changes to that and then everything changes. I'm not joking, Collin. I had a board meeting the quarter before the economic downturn. And my number one takeaway at the board meeting from the board, which I thought was a really great board at Outreach, was you're behind on hiring, Mark. Hire more. And I'd be like, I'm hiring so many people. No, hire more, hire more. The next board meeting, 3 months later, after the economic downturn, what will you think the first question I got from the board was?
Who are we going to get?
Why did you hire so many reps?
Oh, yeah, they're blaming on you.
Reps? And I said, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Do I need to go back into the transcript last quarter and show you where you were telling me to hire more reps? And now you're asking me why? Because you told me to. That's why. And so that's the whole point. So revenue leaders, CEOs, companies respond to the needs of investors because, that's our job. And then whatever they want, that's kind of what ends up getting pushed through. And you have to be really, really strong and really, really successful and show results to avoid that kind of a gravity well from what investors want. And so listen, is it going away? It's for a while because that's not what investors want. The minute that they want it, it'll go back. And, and I do agree with your point earlier. Like this is a precursor to the situation that we're in right now, because at grow at all costs, you don't create demand before you hire. You hire capacity, hoping that demand fills it, or you're going to create artificial ways. Yeah. We found out that we hired so aggressively that we couldn't have natural ways to increase demand. So we created artificial ways to create demand. And that included, you know what? These people aren't valuable enough for me to send a rep after, but I'm going to email them anyway and waste their time just because I need the pipeline, even though that pipeline probably closes at less than 10% and isn't worth the time and effort of anybody.
Bingo. I think you nailed it with seasonal too. I mean, you nailed it on every point, by the way. So far, I agree with absolutely everything that you're saying. And the seasonal piece, I think, is a bit related to just the finance world, the economy, and the cost of money, right? when money is expensive and it's hard for people to, take loans or borrow, they're going to want you to be efficient and they're going to want you to sort of hunker down. But if that changes, to your point, I do agree. I think we will see just a storm right back to doing things the old way, or, because they just want to spend money for growth, because a lot of what happens is all about valuation for these investors. A lot of their perception is just, if we can get the valuation of the business up, well, I can get my equity out of here and I don't really have to worry about the long term. And there's a lot of those games that go on. So I'm totally with you there. But on the good hand is, a lot of people are talking about this stuff. So I'm hoping that when money does become cheap again, that there's maybe enough social pressure that people will at least start to reconsider not going back down that road.
What's happening right now is the way that we used to do it won't be repeatable the next turn at growth at all costs, because we're erecting structures and barriers that will prevent it. GDPR, CCPA, do not call us. Gemini just got released by Google into Gmail, and all these companies that are like, oh, well, create all these domains, warm them up and do all that. Guess what? Gemini is going to look at you and be like, you just created this domain like less than 6 weeks ago. I see that there's been registered 10 other domains that all look basically the same. You're a spammer trying to get around spam traps. You're done. And that stuff's going to happen, right? And so I don't think that we'll ever return to the tactics of growth at all costs, even though that's a strategy, because it will be impossible, because we've now erected all of these barriers that prevent us from doing it. And, the people that are trying to skirt around the edges and like sidestep some of this stuff, it's all going to keep getting shut down as we continue in this. And how big a barrier and how wide it is will all be determined by how long we stay in this current economic climate, because people are still trying to get around it, and they just haven't accepted the fact, Collin, which is a very simple fact to accept. I can cheat and I can skirt my way around the rules to continue to do behavior that is breaking the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law is don't send stupid fucking emails to people in huge bulk amounts. That's not a bad law. Nobody disagrees with that. But yet you feel the right to be able to skirt around it, versus saying, maybe I should listen to the spirit of the law, quit doing that, and figure out a better way to send emails or make phone calls or do whatever I need to do that actually helps me convert. One of the biggest conversations I have with people right now is like, they're like, Mark, I need better data, more accurate. I need better coverage. I need more data. And I'm like, wait a second. How many people do you have in your database right now? 100,000. How bad is your data? It's only 50% accurate. It's garbage. So that means you have 50,000 people with the right name, right company, right email address, right phone number. And you can't build a couple, $3-4 million worth of pipeline a quarter with 50,000 right stuff. Dude, your problem isn't accuracy. It's not coverage. It's conversion. You suck at converting people. And until people wake up and realize that, then they're going to continue to do the other part, which is when you can't convert, you slam and you spam. And that's what you do.
Bingo. I think a lot of it too, just there's a lot of bad products out there too. And the worse the product, right, you're going to end up with just over aggressive prospecting, because to your point, the conversion is so bad that the only answer to that problem they have is more demos, right? So more emails, more cold calls. And yeah, there's a lot of that out there. So nice thing about this economic downturn is it's going to squeeze a lot of junk out of the system.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of those bad companies are just, they're on their last dollar over these next few months. And so we'll see some of that clean out. Now, I want to jump into this next question, but I want to do it in a way that we avoid going ahead into Operator yet. So if it's impossible to answer without doing that, then let's breeze past it, because I don't really know what Operator does exactly yet. So I don't want to jump ahead here, because it'll tie in better in a little bit. But I want to get your take on, the question is, I want to get your take on AI in sales over the next 5 to 10 years. But where I'm being more specific with that is really the AI SDR concept that a lot of people are talking about. And I don't know where that overlaps or potentially, with Operator yet. Totally different. Okay, so let's get your take on that piece first.
Yeah, so listen, I don't think anybody likes where we're at right now, right? Yet that condition was created with sales automation, and that have a human governor placed on top of it. Like a human can only put so many people in sequence at a time, and write the first email or make so many phone calls, right? Like there's a boundary of how much that we can do in that system where there's a human that has to do the work, right? Even though we can queue up a bunch of stuff around it. Even with that limiter, we don't like where we're at. AI removes that limiter. It just says now, instead of there being a human that has to do this or that, now we can just automate all of it. So where do we go when we're in a situation we don't like, when there is a limiter? Where do things go when there's no limiter? I think it goes to a place, honestly, man, where people are going to just be like, you know what? I don't do email anymore. You know what? I don't pick up my phone unless 100% it says Collin Cadmus on there. And this is, I know it's this person. You know what? I don't check my LinkedIn inbox anymore. And I think that that is a real place that is a possible future, because we already don't like where we're at. And when we 11 exit, not to be called out specific, when we 11 exit, like that's going to be even worse. And I think what'll happen, and in this, I'm a sci-fi guy and I'm kind of nerdy, but like we have an AI SDR, Gemini, and a couple other people are starting to put out anti-AI AIs. And what's going to happen is like the AI SDR is eventually going to be like, I can't do it through email. Let me create this other thing and do this other thing. And next thing you know, it's like World War III and Terminators running around the planet. But instead of guns, they have briefcases with contracts inside of them that are trying to get us to sign. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, we're going to have AIs probably on both ends of that spectrum, right? If there's an AI salesperson, there's going to be an AI managing your inbox, which is already starting. You got Fixer and you got other people trying to figure out how to automate, inbox management. So it's only a matter of time before those tools are filtering out the sales emails and maybe even assessing them. Like maybe it gets to a point where your inbox is smart enough to know your problems and it's looking for inbounds that maybe might solve your problems. In which case, spray and pray could actually turn into a ridiculous huge play, because it'll just happen in this automated background and we'll have AIs telling us what to buy. But maybe that's
it has to be a new channel though. So listen, I think there's a total possibility, but it has to be a new channel. I'm advising a company called Warm Call right now that's doing exactly that. They're like, listen, procurement person, don't have your people take any more first calls. All cold calls, all cold emails, go to Warm Call. We assess it, and then we'll run the discovery call for you. And then you guys are further down the line, and because we're going to be able to say, here's the top 3 vendors that we think that you should continue conversations with based on their outreach and what they pitched you in the discovery call and all that kind of stuff. So this is happening. And, maybe we just need to get used to like email, text, and all that is about to go away. Because of what you just described. And there's a new channel that'll open up. Maybe we just go back to calling people again. I don't know. We have a whole generation of people. Like that's my daughter right back there. She don't know how to use a phone.
It's different, right? I mean, I bet you, when she was in, elementary school or middle school, like I remember, if I had a crush on someone, I had to try to get her number. I had to call the house. I had to ask her mom or her dad if she was home. And then she had to sneak away to a room where she could maybe, have some privacy because we were on the landline. And like, it's different, man. I mean, that alone, growing up like that, it gives you a different level of comfort getting on the phone. I watch my nieces today, like, they're talking to an AI. I asked them on Christmas, I was like, do you know what Christmas means? And you know what it stands for? And she turns around, gives me this ridiculously accurate answer. I'm like, how did you know that? And then I look and she's talking to her Snapchat bot who's telling her, the answers. I'm just like, wow, this is totally like the future. Is like, there's a lot of things you just don't need to know because your device knows it for you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually going to tie into the way people buy things, is they're going to have their AIs, in some way, sort of helping to assess things of that nature.
Well, I totally agree with all of that. The thing though is like, let's think about like what that results in. And I think one reason why we're at where we're at too is because we have a declining workforce, or we have a workforce that's declining in their ability to apply business acumen. And the reason that they can't do that is, first of all, we're starting them off in these tiny little jobs that are super narrow, which is in some ways really good, but like they're not getting exposed. Like Collin, I'm sure you're like me. My first sales job, I prospected. I was the customer success guy. I was a support guy. I was a sales guy. I was the marketing guy. Like I had to do it all myself. And did I do it all great? No. Could I have been more productive if I wasn't doing it all? Yes. But did I get exposed to the world of business and how things worked? And that tuned in all of these things that allow me to connect dots in a way that somebody that starts in this very narrow part can never connect the dots with? Yeah. And so like we have this declining business acumen problem because increased specialization by definition means that you have a narrower focus, which means you get exposed to less, which means that your acumen will go down. And now what happens is kids don't put anything in their brain anymore. They just, type it in, they get the answer, they spit the answer out, and they're like, you wanted the answer, here it is. And they're not taking in all that knowledge that helps you increase your ability to connect dots. And I think that's where the best reps are going to continue to thrive, is they have a broad swath of experience that gives them a higher degree of business acumen, and they will out connect the dots of you. You know what I mean? They'll connect the dots faster and better, and they'll win. And until we get to the point where like we can help somebody get the answer and then keep it in their brain with some kind of Neuralink chip or something from Elon, and like that's going to be a
you just need a direct
spiral.
stream straight to the cloud, right? And then it's all good. Yeah. I sometimes think that's what our brains are anyway. It's connecting to something. And like sometimes our signal's just not super strong and I can't remember that, right? It seems like there's something like that going on, but who knows? But
String theory, man. We're all on tiny, invisible, microscopic strings, and we are a manifestation of the vibration of those strings. So,
what do they call it? The Akashic records, right? Is what people believe. Some people believe that we're all tied into this thing, and that it's not about learning stuff. It's actually about just unlocking access to information that already exists. So, very possible. Very possible. Yeah. This might be a little bit of a divergence, but I want to get your thought here because it does tie in, but it's going a little bit back into history. What do you think's the reason for the low sales quota attainment? I mean, it's really atrocious. It's like they say 40%. I think it's probably worse because there's always those people who did so poorly they don't want it on their LinkedIn or they don't want to report it. What do you think's going on there? Is it just tied into growth at all costs? It's just a symptom of that, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think it is a little growth at all costs. Like we start to let stuff into the pipeline that we have no business letting in. The more time we spend on stuff that we shouldn't let in means the less time we spend on the stuff that needs to be in there. And the less time we spend on that stuff, the less likely we are to win it, right? And so I think that's a big part as we've loosened qualification and actually don't reward reps for getting rid of ops early. We grill them on why they aren't trying to like push through all of this stuff that makes it almost, it's like threading the needle to get the deal done. And you can't have that many thread the needle things to do. The second thing is like, listen, a lot of these tools just shouldn't be out there, man. Like, you know what I mean? They don't provide that much value. There's not that much differentiation. It's so easy to spin up a SaaS tool. You can have like 17 companies that do all the same thing. You can meet with all of them and still really not understand why one is different than another. And guess what? Every one of those 17 companies, you were in their pipeline as a qualified opportunity and you picked one. That's 16 reps that didn't get the deal that are all trying to sell the same thing. I think that's part of it. And then like we just talked about, the business acumen is down. I think good sales training and good enablement are kind of hard to find right now with reps. And,
do you think remote plays a role in that? Because I'm hearing that come up a lot, that people don't feel they're getting good training. And obviously it's always come up. It's always been a thing, but I can't imagine that hasn't gotten worse since teams have gone remote. Everyone likes to say you can do training remote, this, that, and the other thing, because we like working remote. But let's be honest, running a training in an office is far superior to anything you can do online, I think. Do you agree with that?
I don't, but that's because except for 2 years where I lived in Seattle and a year and a half where we had an outreach office here in State College, I've worked remote my entire career.
Oh, you were.
Yeah. Okay. So I've always been remote and I didn't have any problem. I think the problem with remote, if I'm gonna be super frank, is that people don't put in their 8 hours. And so it's not about the enablement. I always tell people all the time with enablement, like you have to own your own development. Like it's like, Collin, who's your favorite teacher in high school? You'll tell me Mr. Smith. All right, Mr. Smith, like, bet you he's a little bit funny, but you super engaging, but she was a little bit challenging, but she like pushed you. And you know what? If you just went to Mr. Smith's class and just sat there and probably like played on your phone during class, or you probably wouldn't get a good grade. But if you sat down and you took notes, you did the homework, you formed a study group, you did your little Quizlet cards, you did all that, the practice exams, you definitely would get a good grade because he was a great teacher. Well, guess what we have reps doing? They're sitting there doing email and playing on their phone during enablement. And then they wonder why I'm not getting any better. I'm not getting any training. No, you're not paying attention to the training. And then you're not doing the steps that make you own your own development. Like, where's your study group? Where's your role plays? Where's the notes that you took? Nobody's doing that stuff. They're just sitting there doing emails while it's going on in the background. And so I think that's unfortunately, the state we're in with training is that we just gotten to a place where people are multitasking during it and don't put in any work. But when I was a remote rep and I got visited by my manager maybe once every 2 months, and other than that, it was on me to survive. I put in the work to figure out how to do better. Yeah. Because there was nobody babysitting me.
It takes a different type of person maybe to be really successful remote, or a different type of discipline, perhaps.
Discipline, yeah.
When you're in the office, like, I would tell people, like, put your phone away, right? We're in a training. Like it would just be obvious that if you're like sitting there on your phone, I'm going to probably call you out in a few minutes to like pay attention. Whereas in a Zoom call, it's kind of, you can't really catch that stuff, right? I mean, you can try, but for the most part, I'm talking to the camera and I'm just hoping that everyone's, listening and whatnot. So yeah, but I guess it's a lot of what we get used to, right? I didn't realize you were remote most of the time. So it makes sense that there's a comfort level there that I just don't have yet. And maybe I'll never have. Maybe I'll always just prefer to be in the office. I find it easier to engage people and
well, listen, it's pretty simple, Colin. Be 28 years old with 3 kids on a 100% commission job. You'll figure out how to work remote pretty fast.
When you need the money, right? It's amazing what that can do to a salesperson. They say not to hire for those reasons and not to pay attention to that stuff, but I think we'd be a little bit foolish to not see how hungry someone is for money, right?
Yeah.
And you can find someone, by the way, who has a trust fund or whatever, and they might still be super hungry. It's probably less common, but it's worth keeping an eye on how hungry someone is for the money and how focused they are on earning it throughout the day, right? When you find that person, it almost doesn't matter if they have 10x the skills of the person next to them. I mean, they're going to outwork them, they're going to out hustle, and they're going to eventually, to your point, they're going to pay more attention to all of those trainings. They end up passing them by anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. This is kind of the same topic. So if it's really the same answers, that's fine. But I want to ask on the VP sales average tenure. And I'm specifically asking you this because you have completely crushed the average there, right? You were there a long time. What do you think's the secret sauce there? Why are VP sales, losing their jobs so quickly? To me, it's really a lot of the same answers that we went through, because it's if the SDRs are being overhired and all this stuff, it all just rolls up to the VP. So I think it's just a lot of overlapping answers, but curious you have any hot takes on that.
I do, actually. I think that the tech world is infested with a phrase, what got you here won't get you there. And I think that there's a bias to moving on from something when you get to the least amount of little problems. But when I look at the most successful companies I know of, like Gong, like Outreach, like these type of companies, they stick with people for a really, really long time because there's so much tribal knowledge and passion and, history there that makes, so that's the first thing, is that we're infested with people who think that the good decision is to get rid of somebody because they've never been here before. But this is what's so ironic to me is 90% of the time, those founders have never been there before, but they're not firing themselves, but they'll fire somebody else who hasn't been there before, which is insane to me, right? Yeah. So that's a big piece of it. The other piece of it is, I don't think that as execs, as investors or mentors or whatever, that we're taking these young sales leaders and we're telling them, all right, this is how you grow. I got really lucky. Manny Medina, the CEO at Outreach, gave me the biggest compliment of my life. He's like, Mark, you're the fastest learner I've ever met. He goes, you can meet with somebody. He's like 10 minutes later, you actually have already implemented it. You know it, you understand it. And what that is really is desire for me to grow. Yeah. And so I did a big post pretty recently where I talked about here's the 6 phases that a leader needs to grow through to grow with their sales team so that they're the type of leader that their sales team needs at a perfect time. What most sales leaders do is they're really good or comfortable at one of those areas. And once they get there, they have a tough time growing past that. And so that's the other thing, is we're not listen, if you're a really good builder area, right? And you don't like to go past builder into architect, then guess what? You're always going to get fired when the company needs an architect. And so you got to get past yourself and get to that next level. Otherwise, go to another company and be a builder again and keep doing that over and over and over again. But that's the 2 things is we have this bad saying, what got us here won't get us there, even though it doesn't seem to apply to the founders. It seems to apply to everybody that the founders want to fire. And then the second thing is we haven't really given people a concept of how they need to grow and how they need to prepare themselves to grow so they can meet the needs of the company where they're at versus they're always a little bit behind because they get stuck in a place that's comfortable or easy for them.
Wow. That was music to my ears. And it was actually particularly good to hear it coming from you because you came from Outreach, a widely respected company. I don't think there's anyone out there that would say anything bad about Outreach, but I've always sort of had that sentiment in my head. And I actually haven't heard someone from Gong or Outreach say it, but I'll look at, what was his name? Jameson was the VP of sales at Gong. He was there for so long. And I would think to myself, am I that much worse than this guy? Is he doing something so drastically different than me? Or have they just invested long-term in him and they've decided we're with you for the long haul. if you mess up, we're going to coach you and try to make you better. And you're just going to keep getting better. And we're going to do this thing. Like, I've always assumed that that's probably just how that's happening for the most part. Doesn't mean they're not great, right? Doesn't mean they're not top VPs of sales. But I've just seen so many people that I consider to be what would be considered a top VP of sales that's just like 2 years and they're in and out the door. Yeah. And so they even did really well. They even like hit their goals. They even accomplished all of these things. But somehow the narrative changes to we're ready for this next phase of growth. And to your point, like what got you here won't get you there, right? And it's like, it's such a perfect point that the CEOs, that doesn't apply to them. I mean, look at Mark Zuckerberg. The guy came from his dorm room. He's managed to figure it out, makes a lot of mistakes and falls on his face and gets, beat up for it. But every time it's just like, it's okay. Like we can figure this stuff out. And so, yeah, I do think it's a big game. I mean, I've ranted about this in previous episodes, so I won't go into the details, but I think it's largely a game. It's a narrative game. They got that next board meeting. They need something cool and exciting. Yeah. It's a lot of that nonsense gets worked into it. And a year ago, you're the cool and exciting story on slide 3 of the presentation. And, now that you hit all your numbers, it's like, well, we need another cool story, right? And so there's a lot of that. But am I wrong? Did Outreach have multiple VPs of sales? Like at one point, did you guys just grow into regional VPs or something?
So I was the VP of sales from the very beginning. I actually did a post.
You were like the guy who, that's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
And then Manny came to me and he goes, would you like a boss? And I said, I'll take a boss if I can learn from him. So he brought in a guy named Matt Millen who'd led sales at Tony Robbins. So he had this whole skill set of like people management that I didn't have. And then he led sales at T-Mobile, which was a huge org and a scale that I'd never seen before. Matt was like my perfect boss. I still led sales, but Matt and I worked together. We co-created stuff.
Did he come in as CRO?
He came in as like SVP of RevOps, but or something weird like that, right? But he
just to pause you for a second. By the way, I was asked the same question at Aircall, and I gave the same answer. And I even said I would help you find the person. Like I would love to have a mentor. I would love to have someone who could teach me things. And then COVID happened and they just aborted mission.
Yeah. Well, Matt was amazing mentor, taught me so much about leadership and people. And he always gave me credit for the things I did and he would never backstab me. If Matt Millen called me right now today and said he needed me to like change a light bulb, I'd fly to Seattle right now and change the light bulb for him. So that was great. But then there was like, okay, well, maybe Mark's not ready, right? So then what happened is Matt ended up leaving. They put me back ahead of sales, but they're like, but we're going to go get another CRO. Well, they got another CRO. And this guy we fired within like 6 weeks because he was horrible, right? So then I had to go up and clean his mess. Then we went to EMEA and like, well, Mark's never been to EMEA. So then I had to go to EMEA and clean up the mess there after that didn't work out, right? And so it kind of got to the point where like, listen, I don't want to go clean up other people's messes. Just like, let me make my own messes if we were going to just do that, right? But I had a boss a couple times. I didn't have a boss a few times. And ultimately, like, it doesn't matter because what I was doing was I was growing into the role that the company needed me to be. And I did have enough room to be able to do that. And that's important. I mean, listen, you can hire somebody that's been there and done that. And they're going to have to get reoriented and figure out, and does their playbook work and all that? Or you can take the person that's already there and just let them grow a little bit.
Yes. Oh, it seems so obvious to me. It blows my mind how people don't get this. This is really music to my ears. It's so nice to hear you say it. But
if they won't grow, get rid of them. If they can't
give them a chance. Get rid of them. But at least invest in them. At least get them a mentor. Hire a coach that they can meet with twice a month. Something before you just bail out on someone who has just poured their heart, blood, and soul into the business. I mean, I get worked up over this because I go all in when I take a full-time job. Like, it is my life. I sacrifice things outside of my life, my personal life, my friends, my family, whatever. And then to just have someone be like, well, we're ready for the next phase of growth. Peace the fuck out. It's like, what? Like, are you crazy? Like, how do you sleep at night? Right? Like, it's just become so commonplace that it really, really, really makes me upset. But it's music to my ears to hear this. I don't know why I thought at some point that Outreach scaled into having sort of regional VPs or something. I don't know where I got that.
They did, but that was all reported into me.
They did. Oh, okay. So you became SVP and then you got it. Okay. That makes sense. So
I never asked for a title change or a raise my entire 8 years at Outreach. And so my title was VP of Sales for like 6.5 years. And then finally they're like, hey, we should change your title. And I'm like, all right, cool, whatever.
Got it. Okay, cool. So I wanted to add this in there, and she's sitting in the background, so it's perfect. But I've noticed on LinkedIn that you have a daughter. I think you have multiple kids. Is that right?
I have 4 kids. Yeah.
4 kids. Well, congrats. I got some catching up to do on you there. But I think you've got some years on me too. So maybe I'm not too far behind here. But I wanted to ask, and it's great that she's sitting there. What's it like raising a second generation B2B SaaS salesperson? Seems like you are, helping inch her into this career path. Any thoughts there? Any advice for parents? Did she express interest? Did she see you crushing it and got interested? Or was it more like you tried to pave the way? Like, are you open to sharing anything there?
How about I'll share a couple minutes and I'll have her share some stuff too.
Perfect. Cool? Yeah, for sure.
So I have 4 kids. My oldest is a neonatal intensive care unit nurse. So very different career. She's actually already saved 2 little babies' lives that fit in her. And she's amazing.
Oh, wow.
Then I have Mia, who is more like me. Like our personalities are much more similar. Like it's always been kind of understood that we were going to do some stuff together. Like it was an easy path to see her kind of going my path. Then I have my 19-year-old son, who is much more analytical than I am, and he's in finance, and my little 15-year-old guy.
You got your whole executive team being built within the household, it sounds like.
I got HR and
you just need a lawyer soon, right? And then a family doctor, and you're good to go.
Maybe I get the 15-year-old to be the lawyer, yeah.
Well, used to be they used to say that you have like 5 or 10 kids and you teach them all a different trade. And that was the concept back in the day. That was like how you raised a good family.
Well, I like it. I need to steal it, be more intentional.
You're on the way, yeah.
But it was obvious that we've always been really close to. So like she's always been interested in me. Like I'll never forget, I had a job where I sold stuff to schools. And one day she had an in-service day and she's like, Dad, I want to go to your job with you. So we dressed up and both carried little briefcases and went to some schools, and she got to see what Dad did every day, right? It was nice. It was really fun, right? So she's always been interested in sales and tech and stuff like that. And so when she went to college, she went to a college that had a sales degree. I don't know if you know Dr. Howard Dover down at University of Texas at Dallas, but he has an amazing sales program. Well, COVID happened and she was going to go there. We kind of repositioned stuff because of COVID. And then she went to a small college here that also had a really good sales program. And she ended up graduating in 2.5 years, but she was, head of the business fraternity. She did a few sales contests and was studying sales and marketing. And then she got an internship at Outreach after I'd left. And then she came back in and was the #1 SDR at Outreach for a while there. And so listen, I think that there's nothing cooler than your kid calling you and saying, Dad, my meeting book rate on the phone is 3%. I need it to be 10%. Can you help me? And you can sit down and have a coaching session and help her and then watch her explode after that, right? So that's really, really fun. But she came to me recently. She got recruited out of Outreach and was at a startup that kind of blew it. And she got laid off with a bunch of other people. And she's like, hey, Dad, I don't know if I want to go back into sales again. I was like, I don't know if right now is a great time to go back into sales. So right now she's doing marketing for a company called Hyperbound and doing a great job with that. But like, listen, I tell people this all the time. They're like, Mark, you have a lot of kids. I can't believe you have older kids. And this is what I always say. Listen, if I knew how cool it was to have older kids, I'd have had more kids, because your older kids, like when you have a great relationship and you've done a good job with them, like it's just a really special, cool thing. And then when they're also into the stuff that you're into career-wise, it's just really, really cool. You want to answer a couple questions?
That's why I wanted to ask, by the way, because I think everyone, myself included, I don't have kids yet. I hope to someday. But that is the dream scenario, to have a child who not only loves you and says you're, great, world's greatest dad, but wants to learn from you, wants to, fill your shoes in some sort of way. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you real quick.
Yeah, I grew up thinking my dad was like the coolest person in the world. Like so unbiasedly, like I didn't get paid to say this. This is not like truly, I think he's like the coolest, smartest, most creative person in the world. And so growing up, I think I just had this drive to be like, how do I be exactly like my dad? Like I want to be just like him. He's so freaking cool. And so I think anytime we'd be out in public or with friends, and my mom would go chat with the girls and my dad would have his little tech bro talks, I was always weaseling my way over into the boy chats because I wanted to learn what he was talking about. And I was so interested in what he had to say. And so I think that really shaped me. Maybe it brainwashed me, hypnotized me a little bit. I don't know, but it led me right to where I am now. And I'm having so much fun. And so I love it. I love getting to sit here and like eavesdrop in on all his conversations and learn from him. And it's awesome. Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. God, that makes me aspire. Like I got big things to do now. I don't need to just have kids. I need to have a kid who's at least half as obsessed with me as she is. I mean, most kids, I don't know if you know this, but most kids are embarrassed by their parents. Most kids don't want to
We
be
have
seen.
tons of those moments. Like, that's
Okay.
Don't worry.
The dad jokes work their way in there a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, or when I try to use my 15-year-old's language, yes, you can see that doesn't work out.
I said Riz the other day on LinkedIn. It was a big hit. I don't even know that I know really what it means, but kids loved it. Yeah, that's awesome. Is the plan you're going to probably work your way into Operator, or we don't know yet?
As much as I love my dad, I don't know how directly working for him would go.
Smart. You've taught her well. Good.
We keep those lives very separate, you know.
Learn from him, let him mentor you, use his network to get in places.
Exactly.
But pave your own trail. I like it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's smart. Awesome. Well, when you're ready, I'd love to we'll do a full episode, right? Maybe when you get a little bit further into your career, we'll chat a little bit about the things you've learned.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into Operator. How is Operator going to fix all these problems?
Yeah, listen, I think that, first of all, I helped create the problem with my role at Outreach and everything we did. So I think I understand the problem very, very well. And if you read the manifesto, I haven't talked to anybody yet that's read the manifesto that doesn't do what we do, Collin, and isn't like, yes, like he nailed it, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of time and effort that went into that. What I did is I went to like, who are the people getting great results right now? And I found people at companies that didn't have like these unbelievable products like Rippling and Vanta that are just, not that those aren't great reps, but you can't replicate that kind of product virality. And you can't base, how do you build a solution to do what they've done? Because what they've done is build a great product, right? So I found like people at regular companies that were doing really well, or growth hackers that if you give them the same list as a company, they'll do 10x the results. In talking with all those people, I figured out what they're doing. And there's a common thread with all of them, which is they find this unstructured data that's unique to them on the internet. They bring it into their system, and then they use that to create insights that attract people into conversations because it appears that they know them better than they know themselves. And so what Operator is doing is the long-term vision is to be that growth hacker on your shoulder that sits with you and it says, Collin, all right, here's a list of 1,000 companies in a really tight ICP, because we'll help you create an ICP. Here's what some really unique data sets that we have right now. Would you like to have access to those? And oh yeah, here's 3 or 4 data sets that we don't have that we think could be super interesting. Would you like us to go fetch you those? So we're doing that job of like, how do we make people be creative? We know a lot about the company because we have a lot of data. We know a lot about the company that those companies want to be customers. So we can use that to inform really great recommendations on what we should do. Then if we have a great set of data that's unique and bespoke to us and very relevant, we should be able to pull out interesting insights. And then we have to determine, are those insights compelling enough to reach out? Just because we have something that seems interesting to us doesn't mean it's compelling to the buyer. And if it's not compelling to the buyer, if you're not attracting the buyer, you're repelling them. And you
like,
have
hey, I see that you went to Penn State University. That's not going to get your attention, right?
You just repelled me. But if you're like, hey, Mark, I see that you just formed a company. It looks like you've hired 3 engineers. Typically, the 4th engineer that you need is this type of engineer. This is why. Now you're educating me. And now I'm attracted to want to talk to you more. And that kind of an insight is the kind of insights that we're helping people create. And then they can shuffle those off into the rest of their GTM stack to get better results out of the machine they've already built. So that's what we're trying to do. And we talk about that business acumen. This is me trying to apply business acumen to a business in a scalable way through technology rather than the hard work that, you kind of have to do over years by having a broad level of experience.
So do you consider it intent data? Like, are you using AI to create intent data, or you consider this sort of a new, a new category?
I think it's a new category, though I don't like that phraseology. But think about it like this, Collin. I think the generally accepted buyer's journey of your TAM looks like this. 70% of people are unaware they have a problem. 20% are aware, but it's not a priority to fix. 7% are considering doing something, and 3% are in an active evaluation. So that means the bottom 10% have intent. The other 90% have no intent because they either don't know they have a problem or they don't care about the problem. They're not putting out signals. So I love all these signal-based companies, and I think that is a playbook that you must run if you're a good GTM org, but I don't think it gets you ahead. I think it only keeps you from falling behind because everybody has that same intent signals. What I'm trying to do is when you get an intent signal, like someone's on your website, there's a new VP of sales. Can we run that through what we know about that company and some bespoke data that we fetched and find something really compelling to say to them? So use a trigger for prioritization, not as the reason to reach out. Hey, that this
Got
is a good time to reach out, but I still need to come up with something interesting. And then I also think that you can use Operator for the 90% of people that aren't putting out signals. Those people will talk to you if you say something interesting and compelling. And if I can move that 90%, just a point or two more conversion, that has a dramatic impact on pipeline gen and all that stuff. So I don't want it to be intent and I don't want to be signals. I think there's plenty of people doing great work there that is very necessary. But I want to be the engine that's like, what do you say once that signal fires? And what do you say to the people that aren't putting out signals that get them to be attracted into a conversation with you?
Got it. How far away are you from people testing the product, or are they already?
About 30 design partners of about 20 other people. I think we're in the mid 20s of a mix of those two groups that are moving through testing right now of our phase one, which is building a list. And when we build the list, we're also going to be giving away all that data for free: email addresses, phone numbers, LinkedIn URLs, whatever you buy from typical data vendors on people and companies, we're going to be giving to you for free because we don't think that's valuable, right?
I knew that was going to happen someday. I said, someone's going to just give this away someday and all these companies are going to be in trouble.
It's not valuable because everybody already has it, but nobody's getting results, right?
It's usually outdated anyway. Like the price we pay for it, it should not be outdated, but it always is. And it's a matter of time before that stuff gets open source. I think that's great. So will that be sort of like a freemium? Like people get in, they access the data, and
that's
then
the thought. Yeah. So we're about 80-90% of the way doing that. We're putting some spit and polish on the UI after a bunch of feedback. And then we have our first couple people in the agent right now. And we're going through a very methodical way of few accounts. What data do you want? How accurate is it? The agent isn't very accurate right now, but when we give it the feedback of somebody on the results, it gets 10 to 20% more accurate every single time. So we're building our way up to a corpus of data that we can go fetch with a high degree of accuracy. And so that's where we're at. We're probably like a month to 6 weeks out from like opening things up so people can come in, but we're getting close.
Okay, cool. So it's a good amount of time for people to keep it on their radar and check back in. And Operator.ai is the URL. So everybody check that out. I think you can submit your info, right, to receive sort of alerts and updates.
Yeah, you can request early access. If you have very specific parameters, we'll schedule a meeting with you pretty immediately. If you don't fall in those parameters, we have something that kind of keeps you connected to us, and we'll start to let those people in as we start to make the really good fit people really start to sing with the value we're creating for them.
Perfect. Well, best of luck to you. Let me know how I can be helpful throughout your journey. And thanks for joining me. Are you on Twitter? I know everyone go follow Mark on LinkedIn if you're not already, but I didn't see you on Twitter or anywhere else. So LinkedIn's the spot to go, yeah?
That's all I do, just the LinkedIn. No other social networks.
Keep it simple. LinkedIn and Operator.ai. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining me. We'll have to have you back on after the product's worked its way into the market, and we'll chat further about how it's going. But thanks so much.
Talk soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.